Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And you know that the censorship
I have to disagree with
was
you.
specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none.
Margaret Brennan yesterday, the host of Face the Nation, grilling Marco Rubio, and she came up with what could very well be the stupidest thing you've ever heard from a network television employee, and that includes Al Sharpton. Watch.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide, and he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship
I have to disagree with
was
you.
specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history. I also think it's wrong. Again, I go back to the point of his speech. Okay, the point of his speech was basically that there is an erosion in free speech and intolerance for opposing points of view within Europe. And that's of concern because that is eroding. That's not an erosion of your military capabilities. That's not an erosion of your economic standing. That's an erosion of the actual values that bind us together in this transatlantic union that everybody talks about. And I think allies and friends and partners that have worked together now for 80 years should be able to speak frankly to one another in open forums. Without being offended, insulted, or upset. And I spoke to foreign ministers from multiple countries throughout Europe. Many of them probably didn't like the speech or didn't agree with it, but they were continuing to engage with us on all sorts of issues that unite us. So again, at the end of the day, I think that people give all. That is a forum in which you're supposed to be inviting people to give speeches, not basically a chorus where everyone is saying the exact same thing. That's not always going to be the case when it's a collection of democracies where leaders have the right and the privilege to speak their minds in forums such as these.
Mr. Secretary, I'm told that we are out of time. Well,
I'm told that we're out of time because I've just ruined my career by making the most asinine statement about the Holocaust anyone's ever made. Honestly, if anybody made this sort of comment on any other right of center network, would they have a job today? Where's CBS News? Have they put out a statement about this yet? Do you think she's going to last the week? Do you think she'll be sitting in that chair next Sunday when it's time for Face the Nation? This should be a career ender. And listen, I don't want to see anybody lose their career. But let's face it, Margaret Brennan did what she did because she thinks it's her job to fight anybody from the Trump administration, to take issue with them, to try to expose them, to try to fact check them, to try to shut them down, to try to win a debate in some way with them, instead of actually doing her job, which is to ask questions, to get information, and elucidate for the viewers, however many are left. But you see, these questions aren't designed to try to get an answer and try to get information and find out what the administration's position is on a issue having to do with our relationship with countries in Europe and whether they're going to open up about their free speech laws. No, her position, why she asked this question the way she did, is because she's trying to pick a fight. She's trying to create some sort of tension. She's trying to expose Marco Rubio, JD Vance, and Trump as the fascists they are. And she's so blind by that rage, that agenda that goes well beyond anything that should be defined as journalism, that she made herself look like a complete and total idiot and moron. We're going to watch it again. I want to break down some of the words she chooses to use. It's fascinating.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct.
Let me just stop there for a minute. Think about that phrase for a minute. Free speech was weaponized. This is a journalist. She's a broadcaster. She's hosts a television show, Face the Nation, that enjoys the protections of our First Amendment, the freedom of the press here in America, and freedom of speech. within the context of our country, within the context of the freedom of the speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, all of those things that are protected in our First Amendment, can someone explain to me how one weaponizes a freedom? How is liberty weaponized here exactly? See, if you're on the left, if you're on the political left, and you have a graduate degree, or you don't even need an advanced degree, I think she's got a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Virginia. And boy, the Cavaliers should be really proud of their favorite daughter today. There's that University of Virginia education there. She got a degree in foreign affairs. And I'm thinking to get a degree in foreign affairs, you had to have some kind of world history class at some point during that curriculum, but maybe not. I could be wrong. How exactly does one reach this elite status in American intelligentsia and then figure out a way to use your words in such a maniacally depraved way as to suggest that one can weaponize freedom? One can weaponize liberty. Just think about it for a second. In the hallways of CBS News with producers and writers and journalists, she's applauded as an intellectual shining light because she uses phrases like, they're weaponizing freedom of speech. Is there any other freedom that can be weaponized? Can you weaponize? Oh, I'd love to ask Margaret Brennan here if one can weaponize freedom of choice, even though that's not really a constitutionally protected weapon, not when it's employed the way they use choice. But hey, Margaret, do you think you have a right to an abortion? Can that be weaponized? No, hell no, that can't be weaponized. But apparently freedom of speech can be weaponized. It's the kind of phrase that is laughed out of the room and considered moral idiocy, if not morally repugnant, in any other walk of life. But it's also the kind of phrase that a graduate student could be using in a lecture to undergrads who are in this class just to get the necessary credit they have to get in world history or in civil rights to graduate from college. So everyone's just bored and looking at Snapchat or something, and they're not even paying attention. And the graduate says, yes, they weaponized freedom of speech and it brought on a genocide. And everyone's like, okay, great. That's great. Was that your thesis, your master's thesis? Good for you. Watch it again.
He was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide.
Yeah, because she's talking about the Nazis, of course, because that's the country he was standing in. He was standing in Germany, JD Vance was. And everyone knows about the Nazis, that they were just crazy about civil rights and freedom of speech. That was the plan, actually. If you read Mein Kampf, you'll see it right there in black and white with some splattering of red on the page, too, where Hitler was laying out his grand plan there. We're going to take power and we're going to kill 6 million Jews by ensuring that everyone has free speech. Got to weaponize that free speech. It's the only way we get it done. Anybody should mock this person. Anyone should treat them as the morally repugnant idiot that they are, unless, of course, you're a television producer. In fact, this guy, Jesse Rodriguez, who goes on and does the actually, Margaret has a very good point here. This guy is even more embarrassing than Margaret Brennan. I'll tell you why in a minute. He does the actually thing. He says the Nazi regime used mass media, including newspapers, radio, film, and public speeches to spread anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, dehumanize Jews, and incite violence. Sir, that's not free speech. That's propaganda. And the fact that you don't know the difference is kind of chilling, considering you're a television producer for, yeah, you saw it, MSNBC. In fact, he's a vice president of editorial. The vice president of editorial for MSNBC doesn't know the difference between propaganda and free speech. I wonder where his advanced degree is from. Probably also University of Virginia. They really got to do something over there. The night before her stunning career ender with Marco Rubio Sunday morning, she appeared on the CBS Evening News, very, very concerned about JD Vance's historic speech in Munich.
Well, it sounded to a lot of these allies of the United States like they were being described as adversaries or autocrats. It was really the focus here, two things. One of them was migration, and the second was what Vice President Vance calls censorship. He was trying to bring that MAGA message of the enemy within to the global stage.
I got to pause her here because, you know, the speech happened on Friday, and it was a magnificent speech, by the way. And JD Vance, our vice president representing us at the Munich Security Conference, he drew one very real example of the chilling effect that we're seeing right now in Western Europe on freedom of speech and freedom of expression and basic human rights, as we defined for the first time ever in world history in our First Amendment freedom of speech. He told about the example of a gentleman who was arrested and imprisoned for praying outside of an abortion mill within what England tries to call a protective zone. I should say Britain, because I think this may have happened in Scotland, that there's a buffer zone outside of one of these abortion factories. I refuse to call them clinics because nobody actually gets medical care there. And he was praying. He was standing, praying silently. Now, the police came up to this guy and asked what he was praying for. Now, had this man lied and said, I'm praying because I want my football team to beat Manchester United this weekend, he'd be fine. They'd walk away. He'd be a free man. But he told the police the truth. He said, I'm praying for my dead child who was the victim of an abortion. I'm praying for the soul of my dead child who died as a result of an abortion, and I'm praying for all the other little souls, hopefully, that they might be saved. That man was arrested. That man was arrested in the United Kingdom and imprisoned. JD Vance brought out that example of the totalitarian instincts that we're seeing from Europeans here with regard to free speech. And I'm sorry, what did Margaret Brennan just describe that as? Autocratic and totalitarian? Let's watch her again now that you know exactly what JD Vance was talking about.
Well, it sounded to a lot of these allies of the United States like they were being described as adversaries or autocrats. It was really the focus here, two things. One of them was migration, and the second was what Vice President Vance calls censorship. He was trying to bring that MAGA message of the enemy within to the global stage. And specifically, he says that European leaders aren't showing that they have strong democracies when they sideline controversial groups. He went out of his way to meet with the head of the AfD. That's a political party that's under investigation in Germany because it's so far right and for potentially conducting extremism. And he mentioned that car ramming in Munich recently conducted by an Afghan migrant as an example of what he says is out of control migration. He says that's proof you've got to bring immigration skeptics into the government.
And I'm sorry, what did she use? The language she used to describe supporters of Donald Trump, the majority of Americans right now in this country? The MAGA message of the enemy within. I'm sorry, I'm pretty well versed in MAGA messages. I'm pretty well versed in the president's speeches. I think if you want to characterize the movement and support of President Trump right now, again, the majority of Americans in this country, considering he just won the election, Margaret Brennan, if you want to characterize it as the MAGA message of the enemy within, I'm pretty sure that's an editorializing gesture on your behalf. I'm pretty sure that's not fact-based reporting. I think that you're presenting something in your own perspective with your own bias, which is fine. Just stop pretending that you don't have a bias. Stop pretending that you are objective. This woman was one of the moderators of the vice presidential debate. And she is so enraged by JD Vance and anyone involved with the Trump campaign that she's just got it in her head now. She has set them up as the adversary. Every weekend, this is what her show is. And frankly, I think that members of the Trump cabinet are sort of like taking turns going after her because they know that they've got her on the ropes. I think that they're enjoying this. Marco Rubio came out looking great. But of course, if you hate Donald Trump, then you're going to see this a different way. And I want you to be able to see this. See, if you hate Donald Trump, you can't objectively look at what's going on in Western Europe right now with the war on free speech and see it for what it really is. Because Trump opposes it. JD Vance opposes it. Anybody who understands basic human rights and freedoms opposes it. But because Trump is there, well, then you've got to line up against it. So here's this guy, Rick Wilson, who last I checked, ran an organization that appeared to be rife with men who really liked little boys. In fact, many people have lost their jobs, and there was a scandal over there. The Lincoln Project is what they call it, right? But it doesn't matter. You see, he was a partisan, vitriolic Republican right up until Trump didn't hire him to work on his campaign. And he turned that all around to be a partisan, vitriolic anti-Trumper. So, of course, he was on MSNBC taking the side of the censors.
Rick, briefly expand on that, because I know you spent a lot of time in Europe and you know this. Are some of these countries in the midst of the perfect storm to continue pushing to the right? What do you?
Hold on a sec. He spends a lot of time in Europe. Could somebody, one of our research team, while we're running this clip, check the age of consent laws in Europe, just so we can sort of line this up and check with where he's been? Just throwing it out there. Again, Lincoln Project has a bit of a history. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Rick. Explain to us how we have the perfect storm in Europe right now, and countries might move to the right, not because of mass immigration policies, not because of inflation, not because of economic disasters, not because they've handed power over to people like Greta Thunberg. No, that's not made it a perfect storm for new governments to come in and fix all the problems that the socialist lefts have created. No, there's something else going on there. Rick, please educate us, because you're never wrong about politics.
You see.
Look, the immigration issue is one that the far right has carefully exploited in Europe, and I will tell you, the flood of immigration into Europe in the post Middle East moment has led to opportunities for the far right they would not have had under other circumstances. It is an issue that works very effectively with working class voters, just as it does in the U.S. I think that we're in a very dangerous moment, and if you were to ask me how it ends, unfortunately, I think it ends in blood and terror. I don't mean to be so down about it, but this is not a great situation that we're in right now.
Quickly, Rick, what do you mean by that? Blood and terror?
I think we're at a point right now where Donald Trump is going to sell Ukraine down the river to Putin, and it's not going to stop. He'll go into Poland. He'll go into the Baltics. He'll go into Germany. This is a green light for terror and horror in Europe that we haven't seen since World War II. Abandoning NATO, which was the glue that held Europe together for decades and provided global security for decades, Donald Trump and JD Vance and Pete Hegseth took it this weekend. They tore it up and spat on it on the floor in front of their supposed allies, all to please Vladimir Putin back in Moscow. This is going to end, and it will not end well.
Okay, Amisha Cross and Rick Wilson, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys, because Rick Wilson, obviously a master at geopolitical affairs, and again, has been singularly correct on every major issue having to do with conservatives, the right around the world, and certainly Trump here in America for the last 10. Oh, I'm sorry, he's been wrong about everything, hasn't he? He's never been right. So let's definitely bring him on as an expert on MSNBC. Strangely, on CBS News last night, after Margaret Brennan made the case that the Holocaust occurred because there was too much free speech in the Third Reich, then during 60 Minutes, they did a big expose on these laws that are in question in Germany. And in a weird way, I think they were trying to sort of make a case for these laws, like, oh, it's not so bad over in Germany. No, there's a rationale behind all of these laws that infringe on your basic human rights for free expression. Here, let them explain it. They're perfectly rational, these laws. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Is it a crime to insult somebody in public?
Yes.
A crime to insult them online as well?
In the internet, if I insult you or a politician,
That sticks around forever.
yeah.
She's a journalist with free speech and freedom of the press protections, and she seems tickled by this. Did you see the smile? Why? Tell me, I'm curious. Why would the internet fine be even bigger? By the way, it's against the law to insult people on the internet in Germany, and Rick Wilson is in support of these laws. Rick Wilson? Has anyone seen Rick Wilson's behavior on Twitter? Anyone at all? Is there anyone with any irony here at all? Am I the only one? All right, back to this, back to Germans. Anyway, whenever Germans are explaining in their delightfully lovely German accents about how they're the ones who are protecting basic human rights and freedoms by determining from where they sit how people should behave toward one another, maybe it's me, start to get a little nervous. Start to get a little nervous when they have their German accents telling us how we should be behaving and falling in line to better society. You know what I mean? I'm having flashbacks.
If somebody posts something that's not true and then somebody else reposts it, are they committing a crime?
It is a crime as well. The reader can't distinguish whether you invented this or just reposted it.
Punishment for breaking hate speech laws, jail time for repeat offenders. A judge levies a stiff fine and sometimes keeps their devices.
They are shocked.
Because your whole life is typically on your phone now.
God, this is just a lot of fun. She thinks it's hilarious. Well, this is going to be a really interesting, fascinating piece. The people on the Upper West Side of Manhattan are really going to enjoy this as we show them what's going on in Germany. And, you know, if inside the production team for this, they were like, oh, if only we had these laws in America, because then we'd be the only ones who can express our opinion. We'd be the only ones who can conduct investigative journalism, get all those other people out of this because they're destructive. But we're on the right side of all of this. See, nowhere in this entire exchange did this reporter for 60 Minutes actually turn to the government official and say, who's to decide what's an insult or not? Who's to decide what's false or not? For instance, 3 years ago, if somebody had posted that the COVID-19 virus came from Wuhan, I'm guessing y'all would have said that that was a lie and that was a rumor and unfounded, and you would have arrested them, right? But now we know that it's true. So don't you see the danger here? But that's not what the 60 Minutes reporter did. No, in fact, they got so charged up that they went for a ride-along. They went for a ride-along to watch the German police arrest somebody for wrongthink, for bad speech, for unapproved speechifying on the internet. They went for a ride-along to show everybody exactly the exhilaration and thrill of making the bust. These people are sick.
And we were with state police as they raided this apartment in northwest Germany. 6 armed officers searched a suspect's home. Those electronics may have been used to commit a crime, posting a racist cartoon online. More than 50 similar raids played out.
Online hate speech, because you can't have people posting racist cartoons. I don't like racist things, but you know what I hate even worse? This. What about a racist rap song? Would that also, if you posted your song that used certain words that the government didn't like, that they deemed racist, would you be arrested for that? Would half of the entire hip hop industry be in prison because of that? Not because of all the other crimes they commit. I mean, because of this. Would that be the case? Or are you allowed to say, oh, no, because of the color of your skin, what you said wasn't racist. But if that person say, you see where we get here with these laws? Do you see the path that we go down? And this is what Margaret Brennan is celebrating. You see, when Margaret Brennan said that country, Germany, has this history where the weaponization of free speech led to the Holocaust, well, this is the end result of that sort of thinking. We can't let free speech be weaponized and lead to another Holocaust. So now we need to put the government in charge of arresting people for saying things that we don't approve of. It's a it's not a slippery slope. It's a very, very short little walk down a path to get there. Very short. In fact, it's only about 1 or 2 steps. And that's what CBS News celebrated yesterday with Margaret Brennan making that statement. I don't know, maybe it's me. If you agree with Margaret Brennan, if you agree that weaponization of free speech led to the Holocaust, I think maybe we have a responsibility here. I think we need to shut down CBS News, right? Because all that free speech, that could lead to genocide. At the very least, I think maybe the White House should keep CBS News from the press briefings, because letting the reporters in to the press briefings will lead to more free speech. And well, you know what that leads to. You see what I'm getting at? Oh, I'm sorry, CBS News, Margaret Brennan. Do you not like that? Is that a problem for you? I mean, we're just following your rules, right? I don't see how her career survives this. Seriously, how can anyone? In fact, I'd be surprised if any other Republicans or members of the Trump administration even go on the program at this point, unless they're looking to dunk on her, unless they just bring this up. You know what? The only Republican I will respect that goes on Face the Nation at this point, no matter what the question is, just respond with, Margaret, can we talk about this Holocaust thing? Because you haven't really explained yourself. And I'm not quite sure. And I just think you need more time so that we can all understand. So I'm just gonna give you your time. Go ahead. Go ahead. Explain it. That's what they should do. And short of that, I think she should be taken off the air. I mean, if CBS News cares about their integrity anymore. It's a big if. Have you seen the news from economists forecasting a depression, not a recession, a depression by the year 2030? We're in a perfect storm right now. Social Security and Medicare are hitting a breaking point, the largest generation hitting retirement. Yet at the same time, a smaller workforce means a smaller tax base. Pair that with growing national debt, rising cost of living. It's a problem, a big problem. And you can wait for the politicians to fix it because, you know, they have such a good track record. Or just a second idea, you can actually do something for your family and take matters into your own hands. Gold can be a safe haven in hard economic times, and Birch Gold makes it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into physical gold. Birch Gold's going to help you transition an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold, and this does not cost you one penny out of your pocket. These are existing accounts that you've already got. So protect your future today. Text my name, Larry, Larry, to 989898. Here's what you're going to get. Lots of free stuff. You're going to get a free info kit on gold. Plus, you're going to get a copy of The Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with a foreword written by Donald Trump Jr. There's no obligation, just information. That's what we're in the business of here, information. Text my name, Larry, Larry, to the number 989898. Do it today.